Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Bennis. I'm the coordinator of guidance for the Brentwood School District. Just want to thank you for joining us tonight for a presentation from Gene Rogers from Malloy College. He's going to be going over the financial aid process and really diving into the FAFSA in particular. So thank you for joining us tonight. And without further ado, we'll have Gene get started. Thanks, Gene.
All right, good evening, folks. Thank you to Brentwood and Mr. Bennis for having me this evening. As he had mentioned, tonight's presentation is really going to go over the nuts and bolts of the financial aid process, concentrating pretty much all on the FAFSA form, which is the main form you need to complete. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, you'll get some tips and feel a little bit less anxious about the process kind of moving forward. The presentation, I'm going to be running a PowerPoint. I'll be sharing my screen in a moment. I have let Mr. Bennis know that he can pass that along to anyone or post it on the website. So certainly that's will be out there. Also, we are asking if there's questions to put the questions in the chat, and then we'll address those at the end of the presentation. And my contact information, you're welcome to send me an email if you didn't want to kind of send your question out onto the session today. So I will share my screen now, and hopefully we get that working. Mr. Bennis, can you see my screen there? Give me a thumbs up. All right, perfect. Okay. And Mr. Bennis, you're able to admit, I see there's students coming in, you're able to admit them?
Yeah, I'm doing admit, yep.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so just a little beginning, if my screen will allow me to advance. Okay, just 30 seconds a minute about where I'm from. I have been at Malloy since 2006, about 14 years. I have spent time at other institutions in financial aid. Prior to Malloy, I actually spent some time in Nashville at Vanderbilt University, and prior to that at NYIT in Old Westbury. And I bring that up more so just so you guys get an understanding that there's a lot of consistencies with financial aid in the process, but each college does have some different nuances that they use depending on funding and so forth. So I do have a little bit of some perspective from those other experiences that I'll certainly share with you as we kind of go through. But circling back to Malloy, located Rockville Center, right now we're about 5,000 students, undergrad, graduate, nursing majors, education, theater, business. We opened res halls in 2011. We have 3 now. We opened a new one in 2018, so we do have students on campus. We're Division II sports. We are having currently, in the light of the pandemic, we are still having face-to-face classes. Certainly, a big chunk is virtual, but hopefully by January things will open up and we'll kind of be back to some degree of normalcy. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. So just something about where I am. It's been a good place for me, and just wanted to share that with you. All right, so digging into financial aid. Now, what is it all about? Understanding the 2 terms that are on the screen. You have gift aid, which is grants and scholarships. So money that you're getting from the institution based on grades and so forth, money that you do not have to pay back, very important. Then you have self-help aid, which involves loans, work study. So things where you have some skin in the game, obviously you have to pay loans back. So when you start receiving financial aid information, you're going to get information about both things, gift aid and self-help. I also like to kind of begin with showing you this pie chart, which really illustrates where financial aid is coming from. And the biggest chunk of financial aid is federal loans. So that has been that way for many, many years, as you see, by a large margin. But really the takeaway with this slide is where the second largest amount of money, and that's the institution themselves. The college themselves have a lot of their own money, and when they make up financial aid offers, they're going to let you know what of their money the student is eligible for, whether it's merit, whether it's need-based, but second biggest chunk is the money from the college themselves. Early on in the presentation, I do like to throw this slide out because we do have families that just think, well, based on this or that, I don't want to waste my time. I don't think I qualify. Using the example that I like to use directly from Malloy, and for those that don't know, our tuition is around $30,000. So, $30,000 is certainly a number that sometimes can be intimidating. But understanding that our average freshman for the 1920 academic year, just last year, were receiving a financial aid package almost $20,000, and over $16,000 was grant money, so money that they don't have to pay back. So where that sticker price, that 30, is one thing, you want to focus on the net price of the college. So the net price for our average students coming in that year was only about $14,000 compared to the 30. So that's a great, you want to have a good understanding of that net price aspect. And if you go on to any college across the country, so if your son or daughter or yourself is looking at college A, B, C, or D, you should go to their website, go to the financial aid page, look for something called the net price calculator. And that allows you to sort of plug in some information tied to the family's financials, tied to the student's academics, and then it will kick out a ballpark estimate of what the financial aid may be. It's not 100%, but it's certainly a good idea of what may be offered by the college. I always kind of look at it as, hey, if you're looking at college A, college B, hey, once you do that net price calculator, you say, hey, this may be manageable or not. And then you can kind of move on and maybe not apply or apply, kind of depending on what information you get. So a great tool, keep that in mind. All right, so let's start. What is FAFSA? So FAFSA, contrary to what my slide says, it does not stand for Free Application for Stress and Anxiety. It stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Now, right here, I don't know if you could see me in the corner here, I am holding a paper FAFSA. I encourage no one to ever fill out a paper FAFSA. It should be all done online. And the website is FAFSA.gov. FAFSA.gov, I think my next slide has it a little bit bigger there. So if you go to FAFSA.gov, only website to go, don't Google FAFSA, just go to FAFSA.gov. You would be, if you're looking to apply for college starting September 2021, you would apply, you would fill out the FAFSA for that year. So if you're looking at the bullet points here, FAFSA does launch on October 1st, so it is out now, and it launches every October 1. So if we do have any parents of juniors or juniors on the call, you will be starting the process next October, October 2021. But for the rest of tonight, I'm going to be focusing in on the high school senior that would be theoretically starting college this coming September. So you'd be filling out the 21-22 FAFSA using 2019 tax information. So it looks for the most recent tax information that is available. Certainly, we are still in 2020, so nobody has their taxes done for 2020. So they'll go back to 2019 and ask you to provide that information. So continuing on that, well, let me circle back to this. In order to access the FAFSA website, you do have to create a username password to access FAFSA. The student needs to create one parent needs to create one. And they call that username password the FSA ID. And if you go on FAFSA, there's a link down below that says, if you need to create that FSA ID, click this and get that taken care of. As I mentioned, the student needs an FSA ID, one parent needs an FSA ID. If we have a traditional household, we got mom and dad and junior at home, mom or dad needs to create one and the student. And that stays with the student for his entire college career. If he goes on to grad school, it stays. But it's their username password to get into the FAFSA, along with some other federal sites that you may want to check out later on. But FAFSA.gov, you need that to get in. myStudentAid, that is an app you can get on your smartphone, Android, iPhone. It allows you to do the FAFSA right on the phone. It came out in 1920, and it has worked reasonably well. I'll emphasize reasonably. I still strongly encourage students, families, if you have access to a laptop, a desktop, do the FAFSA that way. Easier to navigate. You know, the app is, you know, there's still as with all technology, sometimes there's some hiccups along the way. But certainly download it. You can check your status on it, and you can do it on the phone. It does work, but to me, I would stick to the laptop, desktop if you can. Okay, as you're going through FAFSA, I would strongly encourage in the beginning, when they're asking questions about name, social, date of birth, you want to make sure they are correct. They probably are the biggest challenges for the financial aid office to correct. So whatever your name is on your social security card, that's the name you put on FAFSA. So name, social, date of birth, that will get you off and running. So other things that you'll need as you're completing FAFSA, as I mentioned, speaking to the seniors, you'll be asked for 2019 tax information. That would be for the student along with parent. And then also they'll ask questions about money in the bank, parents, investments, things like that. And those items are day of you file. So they're not asking what was in the bank in 2019. They want to know what's in the bank today or the day you file. So the tax information is 2019. All the other dollars and cents is the day you file. So keep that in mind. My last bullet on this slide talks about how many colleges you can list on FAFSA. You could list up to 10 to send that information out to the colleges you're thinking about applying to or you have applied to. You don't have to be accepted into institutions to list them on FAFSA. They can just be, hey, I'm thinking about this college, I'm thinking about that college. You could list up to 10 on the FAFSA. That information goes out to the colleges. Then if you want to add additional, you've got to wait about a week for it to process. Then you can go back in and remove some and add an additional few if you want to. But 10 at a time is the most. But once you're accepted to those institutions, that's really when they'll start working your financial aid file. Not until you're accepted. You do have to be accepted for that too.
Excuse me, I have a question.
I'll take, I think I see Annabelle there. I will take your question, Annabelle, but just in terms of what we did say in the beginning, we were going to kind of ask if you could put questions in the chat and then we'll address them towards the end. But I'll certainly take your question.
Right now?
Yeah, sure.
What if I don't live with my parents?
Great question. And I have a slide that kind of goes through that as we kind of go through. Why don't we wait until we get to that? And I certainly spend time specifically on that. So is that okay? Okay, perfect. All right. So let's move on. All right. So school deadlines, very important. I mentioned October 1st is the launch date. So that's the launch date. That's not a deadline. That is the launch. That's when things start. Every college themselves, they're going to ask for the information by a certain date. Most colleges, it's like February 1st, February 15th, March 1st. The more selective colleges may have a much earlier date, but none before the beginning of the year. This is something you want to make sure to check with those institutions and say, when do you want FAFSA? And make sure that you get that information to them on that date. And the reason is there are types of financial aid funding that runs out. So the college may have a certain amount of money and they say, we want it by February 15th. Then they start kind of shoveling that out to the students. And you want to be kind of first online or at least at the top of the line. If you wait, those funds could be gone. So obviously my little sports thing, don't be like the Mets and drop the ball. Just get that information in and you'll be on your way. All right, so digging deeper into what drives the bus in terms of FAFSA. So income's number one. So both on the parents, on the students, savings, investments, real estate, but not your home. And I'll address that a little in a moment. Household size. So who lives with you? And that's very important. So if we have traditional household, we got mom and dad and the student and maybe younger siblings and so forth, now certainly those would be included. Now, we may have households, maybe we have grandparents living with mom and dad along with the student. They can be included in the household if mom or dad provides more than half of those folks' support. Maybe the parents have older children that went to college or went to work and now they came back to live with mom and dad. They may be included in the household if mom and dad feels that they provide more than half of their support. That's the big key. It has nothing to do with whether they claim them on their taxes. It's just if they feel that, hey, these people are living under my roof, I'm providing more than half of their support, they can be included in the household. So the larger the household, that could help with financial eligibility. Certainly, it's a big piece to kind of the eligibility criteria. So keep that in mind. All right, so going into further on the parent side of things, the income, assets reported with the exception of home value. So what that means is the house you live in, they do not ask any questions about the value of the house. So that asset does not hurt eligibility. It's not even a factor. So living on Long Island where home values are, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, that asset goes nowhere on FAFSA. So they're not looking at that. And that's a positive in terms of driving eligibility up. Also, retirement savings. If parents have traditional 401ks, 403bs, any retirement account, any traditional retirement account goes nowhere on FAFSA. They do not ask about it. The only thing they will ask is your yearly contribution. So if mom and dad does pay into a retirement account, they're going to say, well, how much did you put in for 2019? And if it was $1,000 or $2,000, they're going to ask about that. Then generally speaking, the first $45,000 of the savings that do count, they're going to shield that right off the bat. So that means that if the parents have about $50,000 in a savings account, they're only going to take $5,000 of that and count that towards the formula. So the first $45,000 comes right off the top. They're not even looking at it. Certainly you report whatever that number is and let FAFSA sort of work the math, but at least that protection is there. That fourth bullet there, assessed at 5.64. So what does that mean? So if mom and dad has $100 in their savings account, what is happening with FAFSA, they're saying, well, you need to take about $5.64 and impute that to go towards sending your son or daughter to college. So for every $100, it's assessed at that 5.64, and they're going to use that after that first 45,000, as I mentioned. If you own a business, they don't ask about it if it employs less than 100 people. So if it employs less than 100 people, do not list it on FAFSA. More than 100 people, they ask for. Okay. There is something called the 529 plan. If you do have one, that is an asset that always counts as a parent's asset. Even if it's in the child's name, it always counts as a parent's asset. Now, as I mentioned, the parent's assets are factored in at roughly 5.5%. Students' assets are more like 20%. So for every $100 the student may have in the bank, they're going to say, well, you got to take $20 and go towards college. So, that's something to be, mindful of kind of moving forward. Now, the type is a little small on here, but I just kind of go through things that count and things don't. As I mentioned, retirement money, any traditional don't count. Life insurance policies don't count. Personal possessions don't count. Things that do, though, trust funds, second, like obviously if you have a vacation home, you own a timeshare, not your primary residence, but any other real estate would be something that the FAFSA wants to know about. So a lot of information there, important. Child support received is critical. They'll ask about it. They ask if it's paid. They ask if it's received. It's a special section on the FAFSA. They will question it. They will definitely want that information. Okay. All right. Now we're actually getting to, I think, Annabelle's question, or I think we should address that here. So FAFSA has very clear-cut definitions on how they classify a student as independent or dependent. Now, I certainly don't necessarily agree with everything they push out, and this is something I do have issues from time to time. But what they tell us is that a student that is under 24, unmarried, does not have children they support, or not a veteran of the armed forces, they are considered dependent. So that would mean that parents' information is required. Now, there are some unique circumstances that may make a student independent if they do not meet those conditions, but they are exceptions to the rule. So just to repeat, it's 24, unmarried, if you don't have children that you support, and if you're not a veteran of the armed forces, when you go to fill out FAFSA, they're going to say, oh, we need parents' information. Now, if you read my slide here, it does talk about emancipated minors. Now, New York State does not emancipate, so that is not an option. In the case of court-appointed legal guardians, if there is some, court-documented information that can be shared with the college, the college does have instances where they can declare the student independent. Also homeless or at risk of being homeless. These are things that you would then share with the college themselves, nothing on FAFSA. And then the college can override FAFSA methodology and make the student independent. Now, as you look at all my information, it doesn't ask where does the student live. That does not come into play. A lot of times I'll have that happen with upperclassmen. I may have juniors and seniors, and they come into my office and they say, oh, Gene, I moved out of mom and dad's house. And I'm like, are you over 24? They say, no. Are you married? I say, no. You have children? So unfortunately, they still are required to provide parents' information. So it's a bit of a we're not, like I said, I'm not thrilled with some of this information, but if you do have sort of a unique circumstance, that would be something you would share with the college and let them know if they can override that dependent independent status. All right. Okay, so continuing on, if the parent just refuses to provide information, that does tie the financial aid officer's hands terribly, unfortunately, where the FAFSA, if I'll go to my next, this is a verbiage right from FAFSA. It says, to the extent they are able, parents have primary responsibility to pay for their dependent children's education. So nowhere in that sentence does it say anything about willingness. So they're not measuring the parents' willingness to help their son or daughter out. They're just measuring their ability to do it. And that's sort of where we are with FAFSA. Students also have responsibility to contribute. And then the third bullet, which is probably more important this year than ever before, but families should be evaluated in their present financial condition. So just to give you an example, so if you're on the ball, you get the FAFSA in this month, next month, then sometime February, March, you start receiving financial aid information from the colleges. Then February, March, April, maybe something changes in the household. Maybe dad takes a different job, mom takes a different, maybe someone loses a job, maybe someone gets sick, God forbid, but something that changes from the time that you completed FAFSA, we call this, or at least the process is something referred to as special circumstances. So what that means is you've provided all information, so using the upcoming year, you filled out the FAFSA using 2019 information. Now here we are in 20 and in the spring 2021, maybe something is different. There's nothing on FAFSA that allows you to sort of go in and manipulate that data. What you need to do is you need to communicate to the college directly and say, hey, I did my FAFSA using 2019, but now dad has a different job, he's making less money, mom's this, something is different. The only way, or the pathway that the student has is to write a letter to the college, phone call, email, something, communicate what's going on. And then at that point, then the college can sort of go in and manipulate the data themselves and award the student based on what's really happening. So it is a process. Every college has their own special circumstances policy. Generally, when I'm doing this presentation in past years, what I usually tell students is wait until you receive your first financial aid offer. And then maybe you're pleasantly surprised. Then if you want to, reach out to the college directly and say, hey, dad has a different job. I want to update. I want to appeal. Then they'll give you those instructions. So I always used to say, wait, given things, and I'll go to my next slide, given things certainly tied to the pandemic, where obviously many folks have been affected with lost jobs and so forth, I would say after FAFSA has been filed, and you know the college has received that information, and after you've been accepted by the institution, certainly you can reach out and share that, hey, I have something going on, and I need to know how to appeal the information to get a proper financial aid offer. So that's something I know I'm spending a lot of time on that. I think it's an important piece. So I want to make sure people do understand that. Okay. So as you're going through FAFSA, you will be asked questions about the tax information. As you're going through it, they will offer you a way to link the tax data directly onto FAFSA. They call this the data retrieval tool. So it allows you to push a few buttons as you're doing the FAFSA, and the tax return information goes right onto FAFSA. So you're not transposing numbers, you're just pushing buttons. And then the positive behind all this is that when the FAFSA gets processed, about roughly 3 in 10 FAFSAs get selected for like an audit. We call it verification, where the college then has to go out to the student, to the family, and say, we need a copy of your tax return. We need you to verify that the information you put on FAFSA was right. So the college has to check it off and say, oh, okay, you did this right. If you use the IRS tool that links it, we know certainly that the tax return data is correct. So the chances of that verification still can happen, but it's limited, or at least it's cut down. So I strongly encourage linking the data from the IRS to FAFSA if you can, depending on how you file the tax return. Sometimes it may not work, but if it does, certainly use it. Okay, a little math, or more math here, is understanding this formula. This formula is every college across the country. This is how they construct the financial aid package. So they use this cost of attendance figure minus expected family contribution equals financial need. So every college across the country, this is the formula they use. So what makes it up? So on the left, that's the cost of attendance. It has tuition and fees, which is a direct cost from the college. Then you have books and supplies, which is an estimate based on the student's major. Then you have room and board. The student's living on campus, that could be a direct cost. If the student's living with mom and dad, it's going to be an estimate. Transportation, same thing. If the student's driving back and forth, it's going to be an estimated value. Miscellaneous expenses, they need clothes, they need this. So every college comes up with their overall cost. Some of these costs you're paying to the college, but others are just costs that you're going to incur just by attending, putting gas in the car, other incidental expenses. So using Malloy as an example, our cost of attendance, as I mentioned, our tuition is around 30, but our overall cost, plugging in all these amounts, is about $45,000 for the year. So some of that you're paying to the tuition, paying to the college, but a lot of it is just, hey, I need to put gas in my car, I need to maintain my car, I need my computer, other expenses that are non-direct. But looking at our figures, 45,000. I'll use just to do easy math. Once you submit the FAFSA, they kick out a number that says, okay, we feel the family can afford a certain amount of dollars. Let's do the math easy. We'll say $10,000. So FAFSA says the family could afford $10,000. So you got a $45,000 cost minus a $10,000 contribution. That means that student has $35,000 in remaining need or financial need. Then when the college gets that, they say, oh, we can now fill that gap in. We can offer this student $35,000. How may that be made up? Maybe the student's a really good athlete. Maybe they're getting a $10,000 athletic scholarship. Maybe the student's getting a $10,000 merit scholarship. So now they have $20,000 in scholarship money. looking at that formula, they still have $15,000 of remaining need to fill. Now the college can offer need-based dollars on top of that. Now, whether they can, that just depends on the institution, that they have a lot of their own money, but understanding the formula is really key. I have a kind of a slide here I want to illustrate. So you got a private college, their cost is 50. Family contribution, 25,000. So this student attending this college would be able to receive up to 25,000 in funding from the college tied to need-based eligibility. Same student going to a public college, a Suffolk Community College, a SUNY, a CUNY, their cost 25,000 for the year. Same family contribution, same student. So the family contribution is always going to be the same. This student would not qualify for any need-based money at that institution because of that math. So this is something as you're comparing offers from different colleges, obviously the bigger cost colleges may offer more attractive packages to bridge that gap for you. So I know a lot of math there, but I just wanted to articulate that best I could. Okay, kind of going on whose information goes on FAFSA. This is very important. So the first one is this traditional household. You got mom and dad and junior in the household. Mom, dad, junior information goes on FAFSA. So everyone goes on FAFSA. All right, now we have student lives with mom. Mom is divorced from birth father. So it's student and mom only. The FAFSA only looks at the custodial parent. They are not interested in the non-custodial parent. The student may have a great, basically a great relationship with birth father, but that information is not necessary on FAFSA. I switched it around. Student lives with dad. It's just student and dad only. Just to kind of circle back to that. Now, we may have instances where students say, well, I split the time evenly between one parent and the other. You have to make that decision. The student has to say, hey, I live with dad 51% of the time or mom 51% of the time, and use their respective information. You have to kind of draw a line in the sand there. It can't be 50-50. You have to kind of pick one and then stick with that. Student lives with mom and mom is remarried. Student mom and step parents information is asked for on FAFSA. So whether that's fair or not, they will measure, since the step parent is in the household, their income, their financials are contributing to the household, FAFSA will ask for that. Just kind of continue on data on the FAFSA. Who is parent? Now that sometimes comes up. Obviously the biological parent, the adoptive parent, and the step parent. So those would be information that is required on FAFSA. Who is not a parent? We may have students that may live with a grandparent. If they are not the parent, grandparent information does not get listed on FAFSA. Now, if the grandparent had legally adopted the child, then yes, but information does not go. Now, this may be another situation where you may need to reach it. The student may need to reach out to the college and explain the circumstances. And there are instances where the college can, make the student independent, as I mentioned, if that has to be the case. But those are things that you reach out to the college to share that information with them.
Gene, just a quick question.
Yes, Wayne.
Going along with that, if
Yes.
there's a court-appointed legal guardian and the parents are deceased, then would the child file
Independent. They become independent.
Okay, thank you.
They're independent. Yep. Okay, this repeats a lot of what I just kind of mentioned. The one thing at the bottom, if we do have birth parents, both birth parents, if they have never been married, but they live under the same roof, both their income is required on FAFSA. So if you have birth mom, birth dad in the household under the same roof with their biological child, their information is required regardless of whether they were married or not. I also want to kind of circle with cases of divorced or separate. So if there's cases of divorce or separated parents, it does not have to be legally separated. So if both parents live apart from each other, if they're separated, then whoever the student is living with, that's the information that's required on FAFSA. Now, if they're separated, not legally, the college may request, they may or may not, but they may request sort of utility bills verifying that both parents are living apart. So you may have to provide that, but it doesn't have to be a legal separation. They just can't be living under the same roof. And then you choose what parents' information goes on FAFSA. Okay, everything I've been talking about is all FAFSA related, but there is another form that some colleges will require, and that's called the profile or the CSS profile. This form digs deeper into than the FAFSA does. And the reason is most of the institutions that ask for this, the Ivy Leagues, more of the select colleges, generally they have a lot of their own dollars, and they really want to get a clearer sense of the family's financial picture. So they ask for this. This form asks questions about home value. They ask questions about non-custodial parent, as the FAFSA does not. So they certainly dig deeper. My rule is only if the college requests it should you file it. So check with the college. Do you want the profile form? If they say yes, certainly provide it. It does cost a little bit of money to file. So that's something that you only fill out if the college wants it. And I don't know any colleges on Long Island that require it. I think Fordham in the city, I think NYU used to, but they don't anymore. There may be a few in the city, but certainly just check with the colleges. If they need it, file it. If they don't, move on. Okay, so a timeline on the process. We're getting close to the end. Timeline on the process. You fill out the FAFSA, hit submit. You immediately get an email right from FAFSA saying that it's been filed, it's like within seconds. So certainly look for that email. Sometimes maybe you're going through this quick and you forget to hit that last button. Get the email, it's on its way. Once the schools start receiving the information, they will not create a financial aid offer until you have been accepted by admissions to come. But certainly get that information out to them. You want to have it at the ready. And then once admissions accepts you, then the financial aid office can create your financial aid offer, send that letter out to you. Most colleges, especially right now, they're just sending email notifications. But you get that information. It will tell you what you're eligible for. In certain instances, they may ask for information. Like I mentioned a few slides ago, tax returns to double check things. Certainly respond accordingly. But that's when you'll get your financial aid package and show me the money. All these different things will make up what you start receiving. Federal grants, state grants, institutional grants, scholarships, loans, work study, outside scholarships, private alternative loans. All components of financial aid. So when you start receiving your offer letters, hopefully you see a lot more from the top than the bottom. But this is what you're going to see. And then I'm going to kind of dig into each thing. The first thing is scholarships. And scholarships are generally determined in terms of merit by the admissions office. So the admissions office at the college, they're the ones making the decisions on, hey, scholarship, based on students' grades, SAT scores, and they'll send that information to you, and they'll also send it to the financial aid office. Things to be very mindful of. Generally, you are going to be awarded the big dollar scholarships from those four-year colleges as an incoming freshman. If you decide to go to a CUNY, or a SUNY or somewhere else, and then maybe transfer back into that, generally those scholarships that you might have received that were a higher dollar value are considerably less. So you want to, as you're making your decisions, know that, hey, if I'm going to get a merit scholarship, my best chance of getting a large scholarship is as an incoming freshman. Also, you want to be aware of private options. I have a couple of websites on here, fastweb.com. Sallie Mae has a search engine. And these are just websites you can check out to look for private organizations, companies that may have scholarships. Maybe mom or dad works for a company. Maybe they have a scholarship. Maybe your local church, maybe the local library, maybe Mr. Urbanus may have some things in the guidance department based on scholarship opportunities as well. So these are things to certainly keep an eye on. but that would be outside opportunities. I also want to just point out there is some scams out there. If you ever get something in the mail that says, oh, here's a scholarship, you should apply, but it costs like $5 to apply. Anything that costs anything is certainly a red flag. So anything you see like that, just put it in the garbage. I like the third one. You've been selected by a group you never heard of. So things like that are pretty much common sense. You just want to avoid it. All right, going into the big federal grants. When you do FAFSA, immediately upon doing the FAFSA, they'll alert you if you qualify for Pell. So Pell is the big federal grant. It's been around for many years. For the current year, the maximum Pell grant is a little over $6,300. Big chunk of money. And this is one of the few grants that actually, if you apply late, like after those priority dates, you still qualify for these. They really don't run out, but certainly forget that I said that. I want you to file as early as you can, because then you put yourself in the running for something called like SEOG, which is another federal grant, but comes from a limited pool of dollars. So you may get the Pell, but if your application comes in late, you may fall behind and not qualify for the supplement grant, which is the SEOG. So still file early. Institutional grants, I've kind of been talking about them. Obviously, admissions awards, scholarships based on grades, the athletic department, the music department, they'll award scholarships based on specific talent and athletic skill. And then our office, financial aid, will award money based on that math, that formula that I talked about, that cost of attendance minus family contribution equals need. So if there's that gap, we're going to try to bridge it best we can. So understanding that is very important. TAP is the state grant program. So if you're looking to go to a New York State school, certainly apply for TAP. At the end of FAFSA, it will send you a link to apply, but it is only for New York State schools, public or private. There's something called the Excelsior Scholarship. I think this will be like year 4. This is only for SUNYs and CUNYs. And if the family's income is less than $125,000, that's adjusted gross, then the student can apply. And funding is limited, and that's something sometimes folks don't necessarily know. But certainly, if you're looking at a SUNY, if you're looking at a CUNY, family's income is under the 125. These would cover the tuition only, not housing. And as long as you maintain the conditions that they put out there, you have to earn 30 credits per year. You have to agree to live in New York State after you graduate. But if these are colleges that you're looking at, the family's income is less than at 125, certainly look at it. But as my I think the second to last bullet, it said there's a lottery will be held if applicant pool exceeds available funds. So it is not unlimited. You can apply, they can say yes, they can say no. But obviously I want to share all the opportunities out there. And also something that was just new last year called the DREAM Act. And this allows some students, based on their status, and I think I talked about it a little bit, but in order to fill out the FAFSA, you have to be U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. That means you have that I-551. If you do not meet those conditions, you cannot do FAFSA. So if you can't do FAFSA, there are some instances where if you meet this DACA status, where you live in New York State and you've been going to New York State school, there is a pathway for students receiving TAP or possibly Excelsior. I don't work at a SUNY or a CUNY, so I'm a little green on that stuff. But if you go to hesc.ny.gov/dream, I would certainly read through that if your status kind of falls in that. And there is ways to receive possibly TAP money and Excelsior. Every student qualifies for a federal loan if they do FAFSA. They are capped at $5,500 for year 1, $6,500 year 2, $75 year 3. These are federal loans from the Department of Education, guaranteed. Interest rate right now is 2.75, lowest I've seen in probably 10 years, by the way. You don't start repaying these loans back until you graduate, and then you have 10, 20 years to pay these back. My short answer with this, if you're looking to borrow, certainly begin with the federal loans and then look elsewhere. But you definitely exhaust what's available on the federal loan side. But as I mentioned, there's caps. So the student cannot, borrow what they may need. If the parent wants to borrow federally, there's something called the PLUS loan that allows the parent to cover all costs through this federal loan. The interest rate is not quite as good, about 5.3. There is a credit component to this loan, not like the other. So if the parents, credit is good, most likely they'll get it. But there is a component there that it isn't an automatic yes. But the college generally shares the information with the family. Certainly, if they do not, you can ask about it. It is available. It is federal. So everything that I've been talking about federally, you can go to studentaid.ed.gov and kind of read more about it if you want. Very easy to understand. I circle back to this website all the time. I'm always checking it. A website from Sallie Mae. I think I shared that on one of the earliest slides. Just a good search engine, some tools on college planning. Start Here, Get There. This is from the state and has some helpful videos on here. Just some student perspective. I always tell students that check this site out. There's some scholarship links as well. So things to check out. And that is the end. I have my two kids there that hopefully you haven't heard running around upstairs, making a lot of noise, but they're always encouraging everyone to file that FAFSA. So hopefully you take their word and do that. So I know I pushed out a lot of information there in a pretty short amount of time. I think I did that in about 40. So I am ready for questions. I don't know if Mr. Urbanis has been looking at the questions coming in, but we can.
Yeah, I got a few questions in the chat.
Okay, all right. So let's go.
Just a couple.
All right, sounds good.
So the first question I have is, due to the circumstances with COVID for the 2020 year, many people lost their job. What if the income amount from 2019 taxes has changed due to losing employment?
Right. So, I talked about the special circumstances. So that is certainly, that is a special circumstance. But you do need to complete the FAFSA with the 2019 information. You complete the FAFSA with the requested data. Once that information is processed, then you want to reach out to the college that you're looking at and say, okay, income now is much different. Hey, I'm not working, or parents not working, whatever the case is, that's information you share directly with the college. But you start with filling out the FAFSA with the 2019 data. That you do first. And I would, give it right now it's nice and early. So if you get FAFSA done this month, early next, maybe sometime after Thanksgiving, early December, reach out to the college that you or your son or daughter are looking at and say, here's the story. What's the process to sort of appeal? Because this is an appeal. This is what you're looking to do, so that they can manipulate that data and either swap the information out from 2020 to 2019.
Okay. One of the other questions was, what if your parents live out of the country?
All right. So I'm going to make some presumptions. Now, if they filed U.S. tax returns, certainly you would provide U.S. tax returns. If they are working abroad and they are working, their information is required on FAFSA. Now, there's some things I don't know. Do they have Social Security numbers? If they have Social Security numbers, then they provide that information in. If they're working in a different country, you do have to translate whatever income into US dollars and just put that in on the FAFSA. If they did, if they certainly filed a US tax return, you can just take that information. If they do not have Social Security numbers, then on FAFSA, you just put in all zeros for parent. But the parent's information goes on there, and whatever income they earned abroad you translate back to US dollars and put that information on FAFSA.
Okay. Let me get back to the chat. Another question that came in is, will the presentation be viewable after this meeting? We are recording it, so as long as the recording comes out clean and the file is good, I could post it on Parent Square or onto our YouTube channel. The next question is, does FAFSA change if the parent is currently enrolled as a full-time student? I guess
All
does
right,
the,
all right, good question. So the question really relates to when you're going through FAFSA, they'll say how many people are in the household size. So if you have traditional household, you got mom and dad, 2 kids, whatever. So you got a family of 4. They're going to say out of that 4, who's a college student. If obviously the child's the college student. If the parent is also going to school, they do not include themselves as another college student for the child. Now, if the parent is filling out their own FAFSA, they include themselves as college and their child is going to college. So, if you kind of follow that. So if the parent is going to college themselves, on their FAFSA, it's 2 in college. On their child's FAFSA, it's just 1. You exclude parent on the child's FAFSA. Now, if there's other children in college at the same time, brothers or sisters, certainly they would be included.
okay, thank you. The next question I have here is fairly straightforward. I can answer this question. I'm 17 right now. Would it be better to fill out the financial aid form or wait till she's 18? It really won't make a difference. You should fill it out now when you're 17, begin the FAFSA and get it processed. Nothing's going to change with your age between 17 and 18. Does anybody have any other questions? I kind of went through all the questions that are in the chat at this point. If anyone has a question, you could, okay, here's a question that just came in. When a parent makes an FSA account, and what do the parents type in for the student? Their child's name?
Well, if I'm hearing that correct, obviously the student needs to create their own FSA ID to log into FAFSA. So the student creates their own FSA ID to log in. Parent needs to create their own FSA ID, and that really allows them to electronically sign the child's FAFSA. So the FSA ID is an independent step. So they're going to say, hey, Joe Smith, you're going to create your FSA ID. And if Mike Smith is Joe's parent, he creates his own unique ID.
Okay. Okay, so the next question, I'll answer this question. One of the students asked, FAFSA first or admissions or vice versa? And the answer to that is you do both simultaneously. The FAFSA opened October 1st, so you start the FAFSA, get that in, and you're going to apply to your colleges, before their deadlines, obviously, but you could start at this point sending your information to your guidance counselor to apply if you're ready. So it's not one or the other, first or second, you're going to do it at the same time.
Yep.
So the next question here is from one of the students. Yes, you can say that your brother goes to college as well too. When you're filling out the FAFSA, it's going to ask you how many children in the household go to college. So you're going to check the box and list the number of kids.
Yep.
Here's a question. What if we don't know what to do after high school or even go for when applying for college? Okay, would you still recommend applying for FAFSA or work out what I want to do? Okay, so that question is about you attending college. You could file for the FAFSA and not attend college in the fall, okay? You may want to fill out the FAFSA, see what you're working with, and apply. You could even apply to Suffolk Community or any college just to see what kind of aid you would get. And you could figure out what you're doing, during the next year, even if you take a few classes, you'll start to begin and narrow down your career path. So, do you have anything to add to that question, Gene?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, if you're thinking about attending college as a possibility, fill out the FAFSA, just in case. Then certainly, kind of you filling it out, it's not making you apply, but if it's a possibility, fill it out. That's all I would.
Yeah. Many times, students will, you'll change your mind over the summer and decide you want to apply to, a local college that has rolling admissions, and you know what, you'd rather have that information in,
Yep.
ready to go, than have to file it. I would certainly recommend getting it done now, which applies to the next question. It's a similar question. Should we still file even though we are not sure what college we're applying to? The answer is yes, you should still file.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. If any, I don't have any other questions in the chat, but I want everybody to know. Oh wait, I'm sorry, down a little bit. Okay, so to create the FSA ID number, one of the students just asking for what the FSA.
Yeah, I mean, you could get. I mean, you could just go to FAFSA.gov. There's a link. There is a direct. If you just Google FSA ID, you can get the link that way. But it's right on FAFSA.gov. I'm kind of looking through the. FAFSA is filed yearly. You do it yearly. I'm looking at some other questions. So it's every year: freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. File the FAFSA each and every year. Question about maximum.
The amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of a loaded question. I mean, it really depends. The institution uses FAFSA to determine it. As I mentioned, the Pell Grant, that's the big federal. Right now, the maximum Pell Grant is $6,345 for the year. TAP is the state grant. The maximum state grant is $5,165, I think, just over $5,100. So those are the big two, federal and state. So right there, 11,000. But the missing piece is what's coming from the college. So that's something that is specific.
Okay, so the question there about for the FAFSA, you order for the Pell Grant. Okay, so that answers that. The question is, how can you apply to the Pell Grant? And that's what you're doing when you file the FAFSA.
FAFSA is the application for Pell. Yep.
Correct. The next question, the Pell Grant, it is a yearly grant. That's why you have to fill out the FAFSA. October is when it becomes live for the next school year. So yes, October, you'd fill it out. One of the questions is regarding guidance counselors. Can they help you? Yes, you should definitely schedule a meeting with your guys, what you're applying for college. They can help you down your college search. You could use or College Board to use their search to narrow down the field that you're interested in, the college, the location. And, like I said before, you want to apply FAFSA now. You don't have to know exactly what college or career or major you're interested in. It really, the FAFSA is an application you're going to fill out regardless of what college you attend. Everybody's going to need it.
Right.
Help you guys. You know what? I'm going to do a couple of meetings with students. If you have questions while you're filling out the FAFSA, in the past, I have to thank Gene and the team of financial aid officers that used to come to the high school. If we were in COVID right now, ideally we'd have a Saturday where parents could come in with their children and complete the FAFSA in school on our devices, and have people, financial aid officers and some guidance counselors, take questions and help you get right through the whole application. It isn't too cumbersome, but if you're doing it for the first time, they have you ask some questions. You may have some questions, but if you do any questions while you're doing it, I can certainly meet with you and your guy. I could share my screen. You could share your screen, and we could definitely get this year. So, exchange for these nights and doing college goal. Typically had every Saturday. Let me see if there's any other questions. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rogers, he put his email in the chat there. It's erogers@malloy.edu. If you have any questions, you could, email him specific questions that you have.
Yes.
I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. For the session, as a matter of stop recording. Hold on a second, so it's not long. All right, see if that stopped.